Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Joni Ogg, and on behalf of travelprofessionalnews.com and homebasedtravelagent.com and findahosttravelagency.com, I would like to welcome all of you to today's webinar, and thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be here with us. We have a very exciting webinar today. I personally am really looking forward to this one. Today's topic is one we all need to know about, and that is legal information and advice for travel advisors. So we're so lucky to have Jeff with us here today. Our speaker today is Jeffrey Ment. He's the managing partner of Ment Law, a former travel advisor himself. Attorney Ment has been providing legal counsel to people and companies in the travel industry for more than 30 years. He speaks frequently at industry events, so you may have seen him at Cruise World or another event, and he writes columns in travel publications and is an industry expert. So just remember, folks, you are all muted, but as you know, we welcome your questions at any time in the questions area that you see on the right-hand panel of your screen. And we'll get to as many questions as we can after the presentation's over. We do ask that in regard to your questions today, just make sure that your questions are more of a generalized nature, if you can, instead of a specific nature, because obviously Jeff can't counsel on that in this forum. We're going to also be offering a prize to one attendee of a $50 Amazon gift card, which is courtesy of us here at Travel Professional News. So I'm going to do that at the end, so be aware that we will do that at the end of the webinar and after we've done his questions. So I'm just going to, without further ado, hand this right over to Jeff so we can get started. We're very excited, Jeff. Thank you for being here.
All right, Joni, thank you, and hello to the listeners who have decided that listening about the law for 1 hour is how you want to spend your afternoon. So I'm going to try to make it interesting. Hopefully you will learn at least one thing today. That's my goal. Everyone learns something. Some people will learn more than one thing. I'm assuming that the audience has a broad spectrum of experience, so we'll have information that's helpful to new agents, medium agents, and the really experienced agents. I fall into that latter category. I started in this business at my mom's travel agency when I was 14. That was 44 years ago. So now you know how old I am, which is fine. But in that time, I've been a travel advisor, both at my mom's company, and then when I decided I could make more money working for other people, I left her and worked for other agencies. I worked for 2 airlines. Sadly, you don't see them in the sky anymore, but I worked for Continental Airlines, and before that, Eastern Airlines. And I did sales and marketing for both of those carriers. So if you remember when long ago airlines actually sent area sales managers into your offices, that was me. And then I did a stint as a tour guide somewhere in there. And then for the past 33-ish years, I've been doing what I do now, which is give out hopefully sound legal advice for travel people. I'm in one of the best areas of the law, I think, and shockingly, there's only a few of us in this country that do this work day in and day out. And once a year, we all get together in Fort Lauderdale, and that happened to be last week. So I sat with my friends, colleagues, competitors, but we're such a friendly bunch. We have enough work for all of us to go around. So if you're getting legal advice in the travel world, get it from somebody who knows what they are talking about and knows the industry. Today, our goal today is to talk about essential documents for a travel agent or agency, good practices for picking suppliers, because that's a weak spot. That's an area that a travel advisor can find herself being sued over. Having terms and conditions are important. Having errors in omission insurance is important. And then talking about some travel law updates. Your questions are really important to me. Getting to answer your questions and talking about the things you want to talk about are important to me. So really do ask your questions. And if we don't get around to getting them answered today, We will do our very best to get you your answers. My email will be available at the end of the program. You're welcome to email us, and we'll always try to help you. Our law firm over here at the Ment Law Group is 6 lawyers, 3 or 4 support paralegal people, and so we spend a lot of time, seemingly 7 days a week, talking to travel people. But these topics today are the big topics that we always talk about when we are talking to travel advisors. Okay, this looks confusing, but it is not confusing. This is, what does a travel advisor need to have in place for protection? And this is really the 3 things you need to know. You need to have some kind of a business entity. Some of you are going to tell me that you're still a sole proprietor, or you haven't yet formed a business, or you don't know how to do it. That's not a good answer, because unfortunately, the customers that are happy and friendly with you today are your potential litigants against you tomorrow when something goes wrong. And I'll be able to share with you plenty of examples of how travel advisors can be sued. If you're not set up as a business entity, that means that you, the person, and whatever assets you, the person, have become at risk. So setting up an LLC, we could all set up an LLC during the time that we're going to be together this afternoon. So it's not that long. I had a client tell me this morning that she was waiting for her accountant to set it up for her. And I said, why bother? I can do it for you today. You can do it for yourself today. This is not something that should keep you from being protected. Some of you, well, almost all of you would be an LLC. Some of you might better off be a corporation, but that depends on who's in your business. Are you equal or unequal participants in the business? So there are some people who will become an S Corp. There are some people who will be an LLC, but will opt to be taxed as an S Corp. That's more of an accounting situation. There are a couple of accountants in the country that really focus on travel, just like we focus from a legal perspective. Bill Caldwell is one of those such people. I think his company's called Caldwell CPA, and he's a guy like me who talks to travel people all the time. So if you aren't yet a business entity of some sort, that goes number 1 on your to-do list. Moving down, we talk about the documents and things you need. You see the 3 documents are listed as terms and conditions, terms of use, and a privacy policy. Back in the day when there was no internet, you did not need terms of use or a privacy policy. You did need terms and conditions. And now with internet accessibility and websites, you should probably be thinking about terms of use and privacy. The latter 2 are more important if the customer can communicate with you via the website, meaning it's kind of multi-directional. You can communicate with them and them with you. If it's just information only, then you probably still can get away with only terms and conditions. But as soon as you start allowing people to post comments, reviews, posting customer photos, then you're really getting into the area of terms of use and privacy policy. Errors and omission insurance is vital if you're in this business. And so we're going to talk more about that. There are a couple of companies that focus on the travel industry. I'll give you their names. I'll tell you what to do about contacting them. Now we're going to talk about what these various things are. So terms of use, terms and conditions, privacy policy, waivers. Why do you want to have these? Well, they protect you from liability. So a lot of what we do as a lawyer is we think about how to protect you. And how to protect you is really our main focus when someone says to me, what are the risks of being a travel advisor? So in the travel advising world, most of us know that it's a very low barrier to entry world. You can join an agency and pay a monthly fee and be a travel advisor tomorrow. Some of you may be doing that. And those are great opportunities to dip your toes into the world that I've lived in for 4 decades. But you need to know more than just that. And so when you are starting to create your business, so many people start off their conversation with me by saying, I'm just doing this as a side hustle. A weird phrase I never used in my legal life, but a side hustle, an extra gig, a part-time job. I'm a teacher during the day. I've heard it all. And so what I've really come to learn is that a lot of people get into this just to see what it's going to be like. And of course, once travel is in your blood, you really have an infliction for the rest of your life because you really can't get out of the travel industry because it's just so alluring. So that's why you need terms of use, terms and conditions, a privacy policy, and waivers. We're going to talk a little bit about trademark and copyright later on, but it's certainly something that you should be thinking about if you're trying to protect your image. Privacy policy protects you from liability associated with information you obtain from visitors to your website and the information you retain from your clients. When we say certain states have stronger policies, we always start off with California. For those of you from California, you live in a beautiful state, but you certainly live in a state that gives us a lot of agita in the legal world because you come up with all kinds of legal ideas and protections for consumers that other places follow later on. All of us, if we had to answer the question of what is the biggest, best known, most robust privacy policy, we're all going to answer GDPR. And we're going to say GDPR, which stands for the General Data Protection Regulation. It's a European Union and United Kingdom piece of law. And so when you as a travel advisor are selling to someone with citizenship of an EU nation or the UK, regardless of where they currently live, you are bound by GDPR regulations. That's an important thing for you to remember. It's probably not going to change your lifestyle too much, but if your customer lives in California but has dual citizenship in France, that person is entitled to GDPR protection. That's a lot to take in because oftentimes you don't know what that even means. Safe to say it means you can't do anything with their personal information other than do the task they've asked you to do. That means you can't sell it to somebody else. You can't give it to somebody else. You can't use their personal information without their permission. And you cannot solicit them with marketing blast emails unless they've consented. So it's important to keep in mind that the GDPR does apply to you if your client is entitled to protection under the GDPR. Some, not many, but some advisors actually ask their customers, of what nation are you a citizen? And they ask that question not to be nosy, but to determine whether or not the GDPR applies. The kind of agent that's going to ask that question is the kind of agent that sends out blast marketing emails. So you're going to want to know if that's part of how you operate. You're going to want to know whether or not these customers should be getting them. If they're a EU citizen, absent their consent, don't send them any unsolicited marketing emails. Next topic, terms and conditions. Terms and conditions are vital. You can call it a client agreement, you can call it an onboarding agreement, you can call it a customer contract, whatever you want to call it. It's essentially an agreement between the advisor and the customer on what and who is responsible going forward. I get to see some of the most interesting terms and conditions. So people send them to me and say, let me know if these are okay. Sometimes you actually have somebody else's agency name in them because you didn't read them thoroughly to find out where it has someone else's name. Sometimes you think that they're too long and you want to make them smaller documents. Well, the secret way of making them smaller documents is just smaller font, not breaking them up into separate documents, because then if somebody doesn't get all the documents, it's no good. I always recommend that you post these on your website because the C word that you see here on the screen conspicuously is what judges always refer to when they are deciding whether or not to uphold someone's terms and conditions. Did they get them? Blue ink signature, best way to prove somebody got something. Click and agree, second best way to prove somebody got something. Not my favorite, and last in line is just something that says, by booking with me, you agree to my terms and conditions. Because that doesn't require them to do anything affirmatively, sign or click. If you're using platforms, Travefy, Turn, TravelJoy, or some other CRM system, most of them allow you to bring on to them your terms and conditions so someone can approve of them. I kind of alluded to this. If you don't know the importance of the term, don't delete it. So you do yourself a disservice when you start to try to make them shorter. The next one is if you're hosted by somebody and they have terms and conditions, sometimes you just take them and use them for you. That might be okay. I mean, honestly, that works sometimes, but it depends on what their terms and conditions say. If their terms and conditions say at the top, these terms and conditions protect ABC Travel Company, LLC, but your company is DEF Travel Company, LLC, I guess they don't protect you because they don't even have your name on them. So many times a host agency will give you their terms and conditions. And if you simply take them and start using them, but it only talks about the host agency, you haven't done anything to protect yourself. And of course, last in line is the agent who calls me and says, I just don't bother, so I have none. That's bad. So what should terms and conditions have? I mean, what do they need to have to be okay? Well, they need to have enough provisions that protect you, and these are some of them. You want to be able to explain the booking process. You want to be able to explain the onboarding process. If you're charging a planning fee, you want to put it in your terms and conditions. You can have a sentence that says, we might charge a planning fee, and if we do, we'll let you know, because sometimes you don't charge a planning fee. Sometimes you do charge a planning fee. I'm in favor of planning fees, especially when you feel that the person might be shopping around. So when they ask you to design a 10-day African safari, if they don't have any skin in the game and you've got to go spend hours putting together an itinerary or going to a website like africansafari.com or a portal, your time is valuable. my time is valuable. We want to be compensated for working for people. And so having a fee makes someone feel they're going to have some skin in the game. Other ideas on this slide talk about dispute resolution, whether you want people to sue you or arbitrate with you. I'm going to suggest to you that you want them to sue you because arbitration is more limited, it has no appeal. You can't bring in other parties to an arbitration. So if it's you and the customer, you either win or lose, but oftentimes anything that happens to you is the fault of a supplier. You can't add a supplier to an arbitration. You could to litigation. So that's a conversation to have between you and your travel lawyer about how you want to word these things. Jurisdiction and venue. Where do you want to be sued? I know you don't want to be sued. I got you about that. Lawyers need lawsuits every now and then to give us something to do. So while I personally hope you don't get sued, I also personally hope that I have something to do besides drafting terms and conditions, because we win almost 99% of these cases. These cases that you guys get sued for, there was bad weather, there were bed bugs, I slipped and fell in a wet bathtub. I mean, you people get sued for crazy stuff like that, and we win those cases. We win those cases usually on motions, not at jury trials. And so there are always opportunities for you to prevail. If you're doing group business, that's kind of a separate webinar by itself. Group booking business is different than just individual customer bookings because you're going to need different kinds of contracts. So if you're in the romance travel business, if you're in the faith-based travel business, planning pilgrimages or going to the Passion Play at Oberammergau every 10 years, if you're planning a sporting event where 20 people are going to a FIFA World Cup game, those are the kinds of situations where you want to have a different kind of contract. I hope I'm not talking too fast or too slow. Here's just a little cute slide just so that you can think about, the fun of being a lawyer. The last slide, the only document your client should be able to understand is your bill. Sure, they're filled with legal words. It's a legal document. It has to have legal words in it. If you tell me you're a wellness travel advisor doing mainly wellness and mindfulness, I'll start off and include namaste in your terms and conditions. If you want to use a more creative, fun-looking font rather than Times New Roman 12, I'll do that to sort of spice it up. If we want to put your logo on it, if we want to change the margins just to make it a little more appealing rather than a legal looking thing, we can sort of jazz it up that way. It still gets the point across, but it might be a little more appealing to the eye. Your terms and conditions are going to have waivers. Waivers are the language that protect you in the document. So it's the liability waiver, the waiver of liability, the release, the hold harmless. Those are portions of the terms and conditions that protect you from being sued. It's where the traveler accepts the risk, agrees to waive liability for damages for the inherent danger of traveling. There's danger in traveling. It might be very small, but there's danger as soon as you leave your house. And sometimes there's danger even if you never leave your house. But you want to have protective language. I know some of you will tell me this doesn't feel good because I want to have a good relationship with my customer. I got you. I want to have good relationships with my clients too, but I understand that the importance of protecting you is usually why you call me. You don't usually call me and say, I want to get sued. What should I do? You say, I don't want to get sued. What should I do? So you should have a waiver in your terms and conditions. Waivers have a few different parts. We don't need to belabor all of this today, but you need to list what the risks are to the best extent possible. You want to include that they are assuming the risk of going. Now listen, some things clearly jump out in your mind. Shark diving, climbing the mountains, heli-skiing, I don't know. You can think of lots of examples. There's a new lawsuit a couple weeks ago. You may have seen it on the news. A lady got eaten and killed by a hippopotamus on an African bushwalk. So why'd she get so close? I don't know. Maybe the guide said, come close to the water for a better view. Everybody else ran away and she was still taking pictures as it charged at her. Hopefully the travel company can win that case based on good waivers and descriptions in its terms and conditions. A release clause is going to protect you from being sued. And a legal word of the day, indemnification. Indemnification is when someone else is going to protect you if you get sued for something they did. So if your traveler goes to a hotel, trashes the room, and you get sued by the hotel, which has happened, an indemnification provision will protect you so that you can go after the guest and be protected. COVID-19 language is still around. The word waiver is spelled wrong. Look at that. Sorry, guys. We should have checked that. COVID-19 waivers and languages can move down a few pages. It doesn't have to be at the top. You might not even call it COVID-19 waiver anymore. Maybe you call it health-related condition waiver, but you still want to be protected by having something in there because the world has changed as of March 2020, in case you didn't realize that. Force majeure. My two favorite French words from the pandemic. Force majeure language is usually in your terms and conditions, and it protects you if something crazy happens and you or a supplier can't perform because of a condition that was unforeseeable and unexpected. So you do want to have force majeure provisions. All force majeure provisions are not created the same. I'll say that again because it's really important. All force majeure provisions are not created the same. Force majeure provisions from your perspective as a travel advisor need to say that you aren't responsible for giving a refund if some force majeure event occurs. Again, you aren't responsible for giving a refund if a force majeure event occurs. Who is responsible? The people with the money, usually the supplier. So you want to be clear that you're not responsible for things that you don't have a lot of control over. For those of you that do airline ticketing, probably a very small percentage of you, be mindful that if you are the merchant of record, meaning the people are paying you for the airline ticket and you're doing it through your ARC accreditation, the new DOT airline refund rule requires the airline or you to make the refund on a canceled flight or a significantly delayed flight as defined by the US DOT. So if you do airline ticketing, you probably need a few extra things in your terms and conditions to protect you, to try to hold the airline to be responsible rather than you, because of course you don't have the money. So we can always talk about that. A bad word, chargeback. Chargeback means that the customer has turned against you and they're trying to get their money back because something maybe didn't go right, or maybe they're just trying to circumvent a cancellation and refund policy. So what can we do about chargebacks? People don't understand who has to pay when the chargeback happens. So the first thing is trying to be clear with your customers about what this means. You are a small business. If the chargeback is successful, it may hurt you, not some big company or bank. These are things that people do not really think about. So if you are a travel advisor and you are booking a trip through Classic Vacations, Apple Leisure Group, or anything like that, if there's a chargeback, the supplier likely is entitled to come after you or your agency for the money, even though the supplier was the merchant of record. So it is unbelievably important, underscore that, unbelievably important to have credit card authorizations. If it were 40 years ago, you'd have the credit card in your hand, you would run it through one of those little handheld credit card things that I used to do, and you would charge somebody's credit card and you would have them sign with a blue pen. You don't lose chargebacks when that happens, but the likelihood of that happening is almost zero in today's world. So that's why you have trouble with chargebacks. To dispute a chargeback, you need to be ready to go to war. You need your terms and conditions. You need that signed credit card authorization. You need the invoice. You need to know when and why somebody canceled something, because now it's you versus them, and you got to be ready before you lose the money. Chargeback waivers should be in your terms and conditions. You should have something in your terms and conditions that allows you to sue your customer. I know you don't like that. I got you. You don't like that. But it happens to you where they do a chargeback, you get blamed, you lose the money, and some of you will have the wherewithal to go off and sue your former customer to get the money back. This is a good example. By authorizing my credit card, I acknowledge I have read the terms and conditions, including the cancellation terms, which can be found here, and agree to be bound by them. That's a good credit card authorization language, because that actually says you've read the terms and conditions, including the cancellation terms. If it just says, I authorize you to charge my credit card, that's not as good. If you're with a host agency and they give you the forms to use, read them. If you don't think they're good enough, speak up, because it's going to be you that has to pay or have your commission withheld if there's a chargeback. So if your host agency has a crappy credit card authorization, speak up. Use your own. Do something to protect yourself. You should not be responsible for your supplier's actions or your supplier's negligence. But what is your relationship with the supplier? Well, you're not them. You don't control them. You don't own, manage, or control their stuff. You don't have the right to tell them what to do. So therefore, how in the world should you be responsible for them? Now, in my example of the hippopotamus eating the lady, she was on a tour. She booked her tour through an American tour operator. The American tour operator hired a DMC, Destination Management Company. The DMC had people stay at a lodge. The lodge arranged for a bushwalk. So there's lots of different layers in the story of a trip. and you don't want to be responsible for something 4 layers down the road from you. And so you want to have it in your terms and conditions. Vetting warranties and disclaimers. You got to know who your suppliers are. Folks, this is the weak link. You can be sued for picking a crappy supplier. So you have to know who you are doing business with. You don't want to be responsible for what they do, but you are responsible for picking that supplier. So if you're part of a host agency, if you're part of a consortia, if you're part of a network, they often have suggested suppliers. It might mean they're getting more commission. That's all it might mean. It might mean that they've actually vetted them and determined something about their safety record, something about their financial stability, something about their insurance. So you want to ask, you got to ask, how come this company is the preferred supplier? How were they selected? If it's just based on commission, you may need to take a breath and say, is this who I want to use? You can't control or predict everything, but your terms and conditions with disclaimers, indemnification language, and limitation on liability clauses goes a really long way. You do want to provide, if you're doing a certain excursion or tour operator, provide the link to the supplier's terms and conditions. Because usually in your terms and conditions, we're going to say that the customer is bound by your terms and conditions along with those of any supplier or provider of travel services. This would be much more exciting if you were watching me because I'm very animated about all this, but you need to protect yourself by providing the terms, because how can they be bound by something they don't know even what it says? Indemnification we talked about a little while ago, but this is actually what it really means. It means to compensate someone for your harm or loss when it's somebody else's fault. It's shifting liability from one party to the indemnifying party. We use the words hold harmless. That's kind of what it means. You're going to hold somebody harmless by indemnifying them. And it's important to have in certain kinds of agreements. So if you're dealing with a tour operator and you're having a contract with a tour operator, which doesn't happen all the time, but if you're having a contract with a tour operator, you, the travel advisor, you don't want to be blamed for the tour operator's failures. You want to be indemnified by them. So here's a simple indemnification provision. The traveler is going to indemnify and hold harmless the travel agent advisor for anything that happens that's the fault of the traveler or any damage caused by the traveler participating in a journey or a trip. Because you want to be protected that if they burn down the hotel, set off the sprinkler system, create some sort of chaos, that the travel supplier doesn't come back to you and blame you. I think you'll all have this presentation, so hopefully you're not like writing feverishly to copy everything down. We're here at 3:38. I am trying to kind of make my way through everything. So these are some of the things you want to consider. You may not need all of them. We already talked about chargeback language. Want to talk about rate changes that may happen, all different kinds of reasons, some good, some bad. Taxes go up. Well, you may be stuck if taxes go up or government fees change or airline charges change. That added cost is going to come to you and you need to be able to pass it on. You might want to talk about if somebody has a medical condition or a disability, they need to let you know so that you can help them have a good trip. You can't help them if you don't know, but once they tell you and they ask you to do something about it, you have to do something about it because you're taking on the responsibility of doing something about it. You might want to have a provision that says we won't say bad things about each other. Now, you might not want to have that because it might be weird, but some people want it. They want to have a non-disparagement provision. And we've already talked about where to sue or how to sue. You might want a jury waiver, so you only have a trial in front of a judge instead of 6 or 8 citizens. You might want to have an attorney fee shifting provision where the loser pays the winner's fees. That's sometimes a good thing to have with your customers. It's probably a bad thing to have with your suppliers. So if you're doing a big agreement with a big supplier with a lot of money and you get into a dispute and you lose, you don't want to be responsible for the most expensive lawyers that they chose to use to defend them. Errors and omission insurance is really important. What the heck is it? It's like malpractice insurance. But in the travel world, errors and omission insurance, if you buy it through Berkshire Hathaway or Aon, the letters AON, or the words Berkshire Hathaway, those companies really focus on travel. Hiscox, Hiscox, is another one. Coverage 360 is another one. But Aon and Berkshire Hathaway, the policy that they sell you is a blended policy of malpractice and general liability. And while this isn't really an insurance lesson today, that's definitely a good thing to have because it protects you from anything that can go wrong. I have had so many cases involving E&O policies in my 30-ish years of doing this. But it's definitely important to know if you are using your host agency's E&O policy, what is their deductible? Because you're going to be responsible for their deductible. Because I'm pretty sure that's going to be in your IC agreement. We draft a lot of IC agreements. So if you're thinking of taking on ICs, that's a whole different webinar about how to do it the right way. But if you're going to participate with your host agency's E&O policy, if they have a $25,000 deductible, that's going to be your problem. If you never ask, you will never know. What is their limit? If they have a $250,000 E&O policy, that might not be enough. We recommend a minimum of $500,000 and most often $1 million and sometimes $2 million because crazy claims happen to people. So your E&O policy is only as good as the exclusions don't preclude coverage. So that's why the last line here is, what are the exclusions? So when you get into an E&O policy and you actually read your policy, if I could see you, I'd say raise your hands if you ever read your E&O policy, and very few hands would go up. But it covers travel agency operations, and these are the definitions of travel agency operations. Makes sense, providing advice about travel, accommodations, cruises, excursions or tours, researching travel-related information, placing reservations, and communicating by email. That is a pretty good description of what you do. So it covers that, but it doesn't cover a lot of things. If you violate some unfair trade practice law, if you violate a consumer privacy law, a consumer protection law, it doesn't cover it. If you do something intentional, dishonest, fraudulent, or malicious, it doesn't cover it. Probably you're thinking that's not really realistic. Thankfully, you're right. It's not really realistic, but a lot of crazy things have happened, so it's important to read it. These are important, though. It doesn't cover anything about misquoting, misstating prices, pricing changes, or any dispute with respect to fees or charges. So it doesn't cover a lot of things that you think it might cover. The last one here on the bottom of the screen, it doesn't cover anything having to do with debit memos, illegal credit card transactions, commission dispute, refund dispute, insolvency, bankruptcy. So if a supplier goes out of business or files for bankruptcy and you don't have the money because you gave it to the supplier, your E&O policy is not going to protect you. So, for example, if you read in the travel news, which you should read, every one of you needs to start your day by reading some kind of travel news document or email blast, because you need to know what's happening in the industry. If there's a report that a cruise line looks like it may have financial troubles, and you go on to book that cruise line, and it goes into bankruptcy or receivership or insolvency, the customer is going to come to you for the money. Your E&O policy isn't going to protect you, and you're going to be looking at a big fat bill of having to reimburse your customer. All right, we're wrapping it up. There have been some new travel law developments in the past. We've already talked about the airline refund rule. That's important. Junk fees, California taking the lead with junk fees. Everything has to be upfront and advertised fairly to your customer. You can't add on stuff later on. Now, you're the travel advisor, so you're usually just passing on information you get from the hotel, or you get from the tour operator, or you get from the supplier. But since you're the one passing it on, you're the one who's going to be responsible if there's a violation. So you need to make sure that your suppliers are giving you all the information. So if you're using a hotel bed bank, you need to make sure that the price the hotel bed bank is giving you is the actual price and something isn't going to be added. So in conclusion, which is always a good word to hear when a lawyer's talking, in conclusion, what are the minimum documents you need? You need terms and conditions. You need to have language about liability waiver, indemnification, chargeback, cancellation terms, force majeure, non-responsibility, some regulatory language like Real ID. Who knows when Real ID is starting? It's starting obviously pretty soon, May 7th, Real ID is coming. So you need to be mindful of advising people about things. You might need to advise people that if they have a criminal record, they might not get into certain countries. That happens all the time. People are turned away every single day at the border. People don't get to where they want to go, particularly Canada, if they have a prior arrest and conviction. For instance, DUI. You may not get into Canada with a DUI conviction. Terms of use if you have a website. Privacy policy if you have a website. An E&O insurance policy is always important. And here we are at 3:48. We have covered a lot of material. I haven't stopped talking. Seems like many of you are still listening. Thank you for listening. If you need a travel lawyer, we're certainly an option. You can email us, call us, text me. There's certainly 8 or 9 or 10 other good ones out there in the country. Use one of us because we really do know the industry, and things will take us a lot less time. I get a lot of phone calls from people who say, I've never talked to a lawyer. And I say, hey, it's going to be okay. Don't worry. Because a lot of you just think, yikes, what am I getting into? It's okay to ask for help. So Joni, there we have it.
I'm here, and wow, that was amazing, Jeff. Thank you so much for that information. Lord, my mind is spinning, and I'm sure everybody else is too, but it's all good. We need to know this, and you really covered a lot. I know there are so many aspects to what you do, and this really hones in, so thank you. And I've had so many people say thank you, so I'm sharing that with you as well. So we do have a lot of questions. We're not probably going to get to all of these questions. Unfortunately, there won't be time for that. But I'm going to try to pick out some of them that I've seen more than once, and we can kind of go with those first. Couple questions about an LLC, if you can answer it. Does an LLC have to be renewed yearly?
Okay, an LLC doesn't have to be renewed yearly, but most states have a requirement for an annual report to be filed yearly, and that should take no more than 15 to 30 minutes to do on a yearly basis.
Thank you. Do you have to set up an LLC in the same state that you live or work from? And their point is they live in California, or California is so expensive, and we all know that. So it's easier to do in another state. But as I understood you, where you're operating business from, it has to be in that state. Is that correct?
So most of you will do it in the state you operate, but you could do it in Delaware, you could do it in Wyoming. Those are more friendly locations. It just becomes a little more complicated. You're going to want to talk to an accountant to see if there's going to be any issues or problems, or whether you'll need to have 2 returns, because you don't want to do that. You're not going to want to make more trouble.
No, we don't want to give them any more information than we already are, right? Okay, let's see. Let me get to some of the other ones here. Bear with me one sec, because we've got so many of them. So if a client is not in the EU, as you were mentioning the GDPR, which I think was news to a lot of people. I don't think a lot of people were aware of that. And so thank you for that. If your client is not in the EU, does it apply? Or also somebody asked about, were you just referring to California? I don't think so, but you mentioned California, so that's why they were asking.
California has the country's strictest laws relating to privacy. So I use California as my example. It's a step down from GDPR, but it's a step above most other states in respect to privacy.
Okay, that's what I thought, but I just wanted to make sure. Okay, someone is asking, what is considered a group? Would a 3-generation family of 13 be considered a group?
Yeah, I think the industry really thinks of groups as 10 or more.
That's what I think, yeah.
You know, there's different opinions about that, but when you're talking about blocked airspace or cabins on a ship, you're generally speaking 10 or more.
Okay. In regard to credit card authorization, for how does the payment work when the agent has a credit card authorization but is charged by the supplier?
So that's okay, because you at least are having someone, when you give the credit card to the supplier to process the payment, since you're the one communicating with the customer, you need to have the authorization to, first of all, give the credit card to the supplier and to use it for payment. So it's going to protect you.
Okay. Do you have any recommendations in regard, because I know DMCs are becoming a very popular topic in our industry, and they're, you know, they used to be, you know, we used to use them and they used to refer to it as an FIT, and now a DMC is kind of now the new word for that. But they're very, very popular right now with agents because they are able to curate, you know, specific packages for people. How do you recommend, if your host agency does not use a DMC and you want to use it, do you have any recommendations for agents on how to vet?
Yep. So one idea is you call the local tourism office. So if you're dealing in South Africa and you call like the South African Tourism Board and ask them for recommendations, we always find that to be a great source. If you do a little bit of internet research and the same name keeps popping up, and then you give them a call and you talk about their experience and you try to get some recommendations and you call the recommendations, that's how we usually go about it if you're starting at step 0 trying to find a DMC.
Okay. Well, I've got a few more questions, but I do have a compliment for you. Somebody says, Kevin says that his wife is in regulatory and compliance and she's loving this session. So there you go. I thought you'd get a chuckle out of that.
You usually ask if there's any lawyers in the room because I want to be careful and make sure I don't like misspeak about legal things, but
I know, but I thought that was fun. I appreciated that comment very much. Okay. How much does it cost, or roughly, and I know it depends on the state, obviously, but any ballpark ideas on how much it costs to convert from an Inc. to an LLC?
Oh, well, most people don't go that way. Most people wouldn't.
Usually, exactly, right? Yeah.
You can't convert an Inc. to an LLC. You have to wind down and dissolve the Inc. and form an LLC. So uh, you wouldn't convert them. So that's number one. So you're going to pay to dissolve your corporation and you're going to pay to form your LLC.
Okay.
Uh,
All
but
right.
one question would be why are you doing that? But
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Somebody is asking a question, and it's kind of a general question for you, and you may not want to answer this question. So if you don't, I'm sure we'll all respect that. But there's so many people here that are probably going to be contacting you for your legal expertise, which is a good thing. I mean, but I know you're busy and you won't have time to help everybody right away. So somebody is asking, on average, how much would it likely cost to retain a lawyer, or obviously yourself, for basically soup to nuts on everything you need when you start a travel agency from a legal perspective?
So I think the answer is that if you just need terms and conditions, that's one thing. It should probably cost you between $500 and $700. If you need an LLC and you need terms and conditions, there's going to be some government fees you're going to have to pay, but those are separate. If you're asking like what would a lawyer probably charge to do LLC, terms and conditions, I don't know, it's probably around $1,000 to $1,500 total. So I suppose
Money well spent.
yeah, I suppose it's anywhere between $500 and $1,500 depending on what you need.
Okay. Do you work with Canadian agents? Somebody's asking. We've had a few Canadians on here today.
So if you're from one of the seven provinces that doesn't have like a seller of travel provision, like three of them have, we can give you some advice. If you're in one of the provinces that requires travel registration, you should call, and this is going to be easy to remember. His name is Tim Law, L-A-W. Like,
Okay.
how perfect, right? Tim Law is in Toronto, and he is the guy to call if you need Canadian legal advice for a travel advisor. Tim.
Okay. Thank you. That's perfect. Okay, so we've got so many questions, Jeff. We're never going to get to them all. I want everybody to know that Jeff will have an opportunity to review some of these questions if he decides to reach out to you afterwards. But please understand, he's a busy man, and he's given us so much information, so much of his time already. I'm sure that he would appreciate your support in terms of any business that you can send his way or his partner's ways. We so appreciate what he's done. This is just like such information, so much information, but so important for you all to protect yourselves. I wish we could have gotten to all these questions. It would be great, but he'd be on here for the next 4 hours, I think, at the rate we're going. So he probably doesn't have time for that.
Questions are great. I'll be at ASTA in Salt Lake City if anybody's going to ASTA. It's a great organization, does a lot of good work for travel agencies out in the field with its lobbying efforts. So yeah, that's pretty much what we have. We filled an hour pretty easily, but if you have another couple questions.
All right, let me take a couple more here. Everybody just keeps going, how enlightening, oh my goodness. Okay, here's a good one that I think a lot of people have in the back of their mind. What kind of an electronic credit card form is acceptable? Is email authorization sufficient?
Yeah, I mean, email authorizations are better than nothing. You run the risk of somebody saying, well, I didn't do that or I didn't see that, and then you get into this IP address situation. But yeah, I mean, I'd rather have you get an email from your client that says, I authorize you to use my credit card. I'd like you to have something. I'd really like you to have kind of the form I suggested. I'd like you to be able to send it as a DocuSign and someone can just DocuSign it. That would be great. Hey, be careful about wire fraud. If you guys are involved in having people wire money and you're providing the wiring information, if there's some hacker in the middle who steals it and gives wrong information, you could be held responsible.
Okay, all right. All right, so I think that probably is going to do it for us today. I'm hoping that, Jeff, some folks will probably reach out to you. And I know that I speak for all these people here on the webinar. We had a great attendance and everybody was engaged the entire time. I've had questions rolling in front of me like crazy. So thank you all for all of that. We do have a prize we are going to give away. So I'm going to ask a question that Jeff has provided to me. For those of you who've been on our webinars, and I know we have a lot of people back here who have been with us before, you know that what we basically do is ask you to answer the question as fast as you possibly can by keyboarding it into the questions area where you have been putting your questions. And you're going to put that in as fast as you can. It's a three answer question that we're going to ask. And then I'm going to pick the 15th correct answer for this particular thing. So you want to keyboard fast. It will be a $50 Amazon gift card, courtesy of Travel Professional News and the OG family. So here we go. And this was in the beginning of the presentation, so you hopefully will remember this because it was so important, okay? What are the 3 key ways to protect your travel business? There are 3 answers for this, 2 to 3 different things.
This is the true test. If anybody listens,
it is. I know it is.
Those 3
okay,
things.
I'm going to tell you, Jeff, there were a lot of people listening to you. Hold on, let me find the 10th correct answer here, though. All right, we have a winner, and the winner is Terry Birch. And Jeff, do you want to tell Terry what the answer was and make sure I did this right?
Okay, I think the 3 important things are having some kind of business entity, having terms and conditions, and having E&O insurance.
Right, I think it was referred to as terms and conditions, privacy policy, and terms of use. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. All right, congratulations for all of you that got that right. Lord, it's just, we've literally got so many. It's awesome. All right, so thank you for that. And Terry, congratulations. I'll be sending you information on that later this afternoon. And I just want to reiterate, folks, we did record this, thank goodness. We have all of this information, and Jeff, thank you for that. And we will be sharing this recording with all of you. Probably happen tomorrow afternoon. You should be getting an email from us that will include a link to be able to do that. We aren't sending the slides. We're just going to be sending the recording. So if you'd like to watch it again and want to get your phone out and take pictures of the slides, you'll have an opportunity to do that. But that will take care of it for us today. Jeff, I don't even know how to thank you enough. We are so honored that you came and talked with us today, and we really appreciate everything that you're doing. And I can't believe that you worked for your mother as a travel agent when you were 14, because I worked for my mom when I was 16 when I started working for my mom's agency. So you and I probably have a lot of stories.
Go way back. Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, we go way back. It's way back. Well, thank you again, Jeff. And everybody, thank you for being here today and being so attentive. It was a great presentation, and we look forward to seeing you all next time. Thank you.